Here we go. Good morning, Donnie, and welcome to virtual Forest Park Junior Senior High School.
Good morning.
Donnie has been a staff writer for Charlie Pride, Alabama, and several independent publishers. He's had several songs in the top 40, 2 Grammy-nominated songs, and a Dove Award nomination. As a player, he has played on tons of demos and records probably none that anyone has ever heard of.
That's right.
So, Mr. Obermeyer, if you would ask one of the students questions, we'll get a little insight.
Yeah, sure. So the first one I got on here is what artists influence your music, would you say?
You know, my biggest influences were the mid-'70s rock and roll and pop act. And it's really funny, when I was in college in the early to mid-'80s, I started noticing people like Dan Seals, who was part of England Dan and John Ford Coley, and several other acts that don't come to my mind right now. But they started showing up in Nashville. And, you know, there was a big shift in the music scene about that time. LA had gone to this really heavy, glitzy rock and roll thing. And so it started pushing me toward Nashville more. It was also convenient because it was, 2 hours away from Murray State. And so I was able to commute for a couple of years while I was making contacts and meeting people. But, if I had to put a finger on 3 or 4 acts, the Eagles were huge to me. Fogelberg was huge to me. England and John Ford Coley, Bread, America, and some Southern rock stuff. That's what I really grew up loving.
Would you say that some of that was more of the kind of the LA sort of country sound?
Absolutely.
Those days?
The country rock, I was re-listening during all this COVID-19 stuff to some old things, and I'd forgotten how much I loved Poco. And, they're like Eagles 1.0 to me. I don't think you really get the Eagles without Poco kind of laying some groundwork. And it's that whole hodgepodge. It's kind of the, Jackson Browne, Linda Ronstadt, Fogelberg, all those guys lived down in Laurel Canyon about the same time. And it was like a little music explosion that happened down there. And I think that was the wave I was trying to ride.
Yeah, Grande Parsons, Flying Burrito Brothers.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Which is really hard to do is with Gerald Welker as your private instructor.
Yeah. He was very, very classically oriented.
Yes, he was.
Let's see. So the next question I have on here is, did you ever at any point doubt your decision to become a musician?
Every day of my life. Yes. I was given some great advice, or at least a great warning. I was fortunate enough to find a great mentor in Nashville that believed in me. And he could see the passion I had for it and the drive I had. And actually, when I moved here, I was a kid. I was like 25. And everybody I met that was here was over 40. I was the kid in every room I went into. And right before I moved, he sat me down and he said, if you can imagine yourself being happy doing anything else, you need to go do that, because this is a miserable life if you don't love it. And it's very true, because everything that you do is based on or is judged by other people's opinion. There's no metric. I can't show you a wall full of records and go, oh, well, I've done this, so therefore I deserve that. It's the creative industry is very much based on what do you do today. And so you almost reinvent yourself every morning to get ready for it. And so it brings up questions like, why didn't I stay in the BME program?
Right. That's a good answer. Let's see. What is your favorite part of the job as being a songwriter?
Being around creative people every day. it's wonderful, and we challenge each other, and we it's the funniest group of people you'll ever be around. But it's a gallows humor, and I don't think a lot of people would appreciate what we do over the long term. It's fun to be around for a little while, but it's a different breed of cat, and it's and I think was telling Chuck, I've been fortunate enough to be on both sides of the glass in the studio, both as the writer, but also as a musician. And they're like two different groups of people, and they interact differently and have a different sense of humor, but it's always something fun that's going on. And that's probably my favorite thing, the hang.
Let's see. So this kind of goes in hand with some of the earlier questions, but how exactly did you find your calling in this line of work? Like, what was that moment where you decided that this is it?
Yeah, it's a funny thing. My parents tell me I was singing before I could talk, and so music's always been a huge part of my life. But the ironic thing is, we didn't have the internet in the 70s, and so it was really weird. I think I was in college before I realized that there were a group of people that all they did was write songs every day. That wasn't like a well-advertised thing, at least where I had been. The minute I knew that, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And it completely changed my life. And I'm going to say I must have been like 19 or 20 years old when I realized that was possible. And I knew exactly what I wanted to do.
Did you, growing up, did you play guitar?
I did, self-taught.
Okay.
And also, I think you know this, Chuck, or Mr. Bradley, as it were. I'm a preacher's kid. And so we had, at our church that my father was at, we had a sound room, we had gear. And I taught myself how to multi-track record by bouncing in a stereo machine.
Wow.
When I was 16 years old. And so, I just wasn't going to be stopped. And well, it doesn't matter what I was going to say, but I wasn't going to be stopped. And it's the first thing in my life that I can remember thinking there was nothing I wouldn't do to do it. No matter how far I had to drive, how late I had to practice, whatever it was, this was what I wanted to do.
Cool.
Yeah. That goes perfectly with the next question. Did you ever have people tell you that you weren't good enough and we're not going to make it?
Yes. I've had people tell me that since I've been here too. There was a song plugger that we just didn't rub each other the right way ever. And I remember him just telling me I should leave and go home. And I almost have taken things like that as a badge of honor, that once again, it's all opinions. It's, he's more than welcome to think that, but it doesn't mean I have to think that.
Could you tell us what a song plugger is?
Sure. So in the old music world, pre-2015, there were publishing companies, and all they did was publish songs that staff writers or independents brought to them. And they would employ a person to take those songs around to different labels and artists and producers and pitch them. So if you had a song that you think would be great for Luke Bryan, your plugger would set up a meeting and go to that meeting with your song and maybe a couple others and play it for the people to try to get them to record it. And that's what a plugger did. Nowadays, the industry shifted so much, the publisher has become more like the A&R department and development department of a record label these days. And So pluggers really don't do that much, if there are any of them left.
Let's see. When writing songs, the first question is, do you ever experience like a writer's block, and what do you do to relax and kind of get out of that and get unstuck?
Yeah, you know, the best cure for anything is just keep doing it. Obviously, you have different moods that you go through. Like one of my big things is, and I noticed it early on in my career, but I don't like to write songs during the summer because something in my head tells me it's summer vacation, like I was still in school or something. And so I have to make myself go do it. And I also discovered that in the fall of the year, I'm at my most creative. And I don't know that it has so much to do with the season or anything as much as it does. My allergies are starting to go away. And I just feel better.
Do you ever do anything that gets you unstuck?
Oh, yeah. So one of the very best things to me is just to go back to the music you love. I'll go back and just listen to Jackson Browne's Running on Empty album, or some Glenn Campbell things, something that inspired me originally, to remind me why I do what I do and what drove me. And that plus just, I don't care if you're in the middle of a block or not, get your notepad out every morning and write something. Even if it's horrible, don't lose the habit of writing.
That's funny. Speaking of Jackson Browne, the Loadout was the first song I ever did as a live gig, and I had no idea what the song was until the singer brought it up, and he said he wanted to sing it. I was like, what is this? And I went and listened to all kinds of. That whole album was great.
Oh man, I love that album.
Let's see. Like this question, it says, "Do you go to college? Did you go to college? If so, where and what did you get a degree in?"
Okay, so I went to college. I started at a private school for a year, and I was pre-med, and then I went to Murray State University, and I went to the head of the department, Roger Reichmuth. I said, I really think I should be a music major. And he said, we'd love to have you. And he said, this is really awkward, though. Usually people transfer out of here to go into medicine instead of the other way around. I did not graduate. I left college with 122 hours to come be a songwriter. And because of some life circumstances and some other things going on, I remember consciously making the decision that if I didn't do it now, I would never go do it. And I would always wonder if I could have. And so when I was, I guess, 22 or 23, I just started commuting to Nashville and trying to meet people. And then we moved here when I was 25. And so I've been here, it'll be 31 years this summer.
So when you're making a song, how long on average would you say it takes? I guess. Sorry, like the process, because I know there's the lyrics and then there's the making all the instruments, but
yeah. So the actual writing of a song, it just depends. I've had songs that popped out in 10 minutes, and I've got songs I've been working on for 10 years, and I don't think you can, unless it's just a super commercial ditty kind of thing. I don't think you put time constraints on it. It's ready when it's ready. And, that's another thing for young writers to learn and understand is make it the very best that it can be and be your own worst critic, because everybody else is going to criticize it. So if you can work all the kinks and the snags out of it yourself, you're going to save yourself some grief. And another thing that I would say about writing is you know, there's no scale that you can judge a song on, except for one thing, and that is, do you love it? Do you love what you've done? If you love it, somebody else is going to love it too, because you're not singular, you're not unique. And so just make sure you love it and you believe in it, you know.
Absolutely. So do you have a count on how many songs you've written total?
Thousands. I don't have a count, but thousands.
Let's see. This is one related to now, but are these quarantine times, are they making it easier or harder to come up with any particular song ideas?
It's a good question. You know, I think for me, I've been so concerned with everything the world's going through and the logistics of what life looks like right now, as far as how safe is it to really go to the grocery or whatever, that I've been kind of taking a break from that. Plus, I've got some things I'm doing in the studio at home right now that are kind of different from me writing songs. And that's another thing I learned about me. You know, you gotta learn about yourself as you go through processes. The songwriter creative side of me can't be bothered with technology. The minute I start fooling with technology, that part of my creative self goes away. And I've never learned how to turn it back on until I go to sleep and come back the next day. And so when I'm in the studio recording and manipulating files and, you know, flying things around, I'm just not in that same headspace. I'm not a writer for that time.
Now, you record your demos and everything there in your home studio?
Quite a bit. Or I may go downtown and cut some tracks and bring the tracks back home. Or also, it's gotten good enough now, you know, that I'll send a file to a drummer friend of mine. He'll cut drums for me and send them back. And if I want steel guitar or strings or whatever, I'll send that off to somebody else and they'll send it back over here. And, you know, that's also something I'll say that we've really lost. And I don't know how you guys approach this, but I really miss the days of us all being in one room together, because there's a magic that happens when you've got a collective 300 years of recording in the room. And so let's say that I wrote the charts for the day and we're listening down to the first song and the bass player goes, wait a minute, in this first turn, why don't we cut that in half and do this and do that? And all of a sudden it spurs another idea from the keyboard guy that goes, yeah, that would be great, especially if we change this to a 6 minor. And so you get this input and dynamic going on that you really can't get as a lone musician. You know, I hate my demos because they all sound like me, you know, because it's me playing everything. And that's something that we've lost. So play music with other people, guys, as much as you can.
That's the struggle right now is with all these, you know, high school assignments and the struggle is hard enough just getting them to play their instrument alone, let alone I know several other band directors that they're having every student like record with a metronome and they're putting all the tracks together to simulate the ensemble setting, but that doesn't, you're not playing, you're not listening to the ensemble, you're not doing anything. And it's a lot of backwards motion, unfortunately.
Exactly. Total agreement on that.
Let's see. Some of these kind of hard to touch on. So as a musician, kind of walk through like your work day, like the hours, like the kind of time you put into it, like what your general schedule is like. I know it kind of goes along with how long it takes to make a song, but just kind of the general process. If you were put like a time frame as you go along.
Yeah. So the way Nashville was structured from way back, the 50s, they all came to an agreement. And I'm not sure who all was involved in it. I'm sure it had to do with studio owners and the union and some people, but they decided that sessions would be at 10 a.m., 2 p.m., 6 p.m., and 9 p.m., or 10 p.m. And so it's a 3-hour block. So it'd be like 10 to 1. And then you had an hour in between sessions to grab lunch or to go to your next session, which would be at 2 o'clock. So the whole town started kind of revolving around that schedule. And so writing appointments were at 10 o'clock. And that was has been so much part of my life that that's still the way I kind of do it. I try to be doing something creative by 10 o'clock in the morning. Now, as a writer, by 2 or 3 o'clock, I'm pretty well burned out. And another good piece of advice that was given me when I moved here, I was just going at it day and night, writing. And finally, my mentor guy sat me down one day and he said, look, you've got to learn to set this down at 5 o'clock. It'll be here again tomorrow, but go home and be a husband, be a father, have a life. Don't burn yourself out on this. And so early on, when you discover it, like you were talking about earlier, that's all you want to do. And everything you run across is a potential song, and you're just seeing all the possibilities. You've got to temper that, learn to temper that. Now, that doesn't mean, at 8 o'clock in the evening, if I get a great idea, I'm reaching for a piece of paper to write it down. But it doesn't mean that I'm going to abandon what I'm doing and go write the song. It'll be there in the morning. But be sure to write stuff down.
Right.
I have a question. This kind of goes back to something we talked about Monday night that's not here on the list. Can you talk about in the current age the difference between when they used to press records or make CDs and you sold songs that were on CDs as opposed to people listening to it on YouTube, Spotify, what have you?
Sure. So early on in Nashville for me, my mentor wrote one of the first big hits I was around. Excuse me, Allergies, Tennessee. It was for a band called Diamond Rio, and it's a song called Meet in the Middle. And we were working one day, and his co-writers on that song came by, and they were complaining about their checks. They're from DMI and ASCAP. And I thought, well, what are they doing at DMI now? And the problem was they'd never been paid so much money. And so I was standing in the room with 3 checks that were worth $500,000 for a quarter's worth of one check. By the time we got to the mid-90s, late 90s with Garth selling multi-platinum and Shania Twain selling multi-platinum, number one single in the total was worth over $1 million. And so and they were selling 2 million units. And so each copy, let's say I had a song on Garth Brooks' album. My co-writers and my publisher would divide basically a dime for every unit that was sold for that song. Now, vinyl has resurged a little and is outselling CD digital platforms. But if you look at it closely, what that means is sales are just tanking because not that many people own record players. And so there are no mechanical sales to speak of left. back then, what you tried to do was get on as many projects as you could get on and hope for a single, because you could make your living off mechanical sales and then hopefully get that extra payday on a single. Now, sales don't exist, and terrestrial airplay doesn't exist outside of the top 15 artists. And so I think I was telling you that on my last quarterly, I had like 750,000 streams, and that would be Spotify, Amazon, Apple Music, etc. And if those had been airplay on a terrestrial radio, that would have been between $300,000 and $500,000. But the check I got was for $82. So that's the difference now. I think I was telling you too, I really don't think it's going to be possible to make a living at being a songwriter much longer, exclusively a songwriter. I think that you will need to be an artist or a producer, somebody that has ownership in the project that you're working
on. So one thing I don't think we have touched on yet is when you were still going to school, but you were driving to Nashville and you were making contacts. So what would you say, like, is where it started? Like, how did you get your first, like, gig? Like, what sold first, and where you could finally start getting into the, I can make a living, I can move in. Like, basically, how did you get the physical start?
Right. And that's a great question, because that's another thing that's changed in the last 10 years. But Music Row was such a community. I'm not going to say anybody's good. I literally would feel the energy in the morning when I would drive on a Music Row, because you're talking about maybe a 1 square mile area with thousands of people creating on it in those little houses down there. And so after I'd come and seen that, I did everything I could to figure out how to get here and make a living. And so the first thing I did was I started taking little weekend gigs with bands around Murray. There was a band down in Paris that played some clubs that I got into. And then there was another band in Dover, Tennessee that hired me. And I was never part of those bands, really, but I was always more like a hired gun. And what I loved about the band in Dover is they played in Clarksville, Tennessee. And so on the days that I was working with them, I could go to Nashville and then come back for the gig in Clarksville, and it paid for itself. And it also gave me the experience to get my first professional gig, which was for Loretta Lynn's daughter, Patsy Lynn. And that was in Waverly, Tennessee. Still not Nashville, but close. And when I was hired for that gig, I think they were paying me $150 a week. And that was just enough money for me to get an apartment. And so we moved to Nashville. And I did that for 8 or 10 months. And then I got my first writing job for Charlie Pride. And that paid a big whopping $150 also.
That's all the questions we had bolded on here on this side.
Well, there's also the old joke, how do you get the songwriter off your porch? You pay him for the pizza. And I mean, so everybody does something to be here. And I delivered pizzas, and I worked at a Kroger for a while, and you just do what you got to do. If it's your passion, it's not going to be fun, but at least you're getting to do what you want to do, what you believe you're supposed to do.
Absolutely.
I think that's a good way to go about life, personally.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think you're better off that way.
Well, I'm no richer, but I like to think I'm happier.
Mr. Obermeyer, do you have anything else?
No, not that I can think of. I had a few of those questions there at the end.
Yeah.
But I think our students did a good job of coming up with some really nice questions.
Yes, they did.
Absolutely.
So hats off to them. They'll have to watch this later and think about all the responses, because they could apply to a lot of this can apply to people that aren't even thinking about music. They can just apply to life. So that should be really, really educational for them.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Donnie.
It's been fun, guys.
Yes, thank you a lot.
Yeah. Well, let's do it again sometime.
I think we're going to have a lot of time on our hands here for a while.
Absolutely.